Okay, well, it's 5:30. Do we have quorum?
Well, give me one more minute. All right, now we're ready.
Perfect. Okay, so it's 5:30 p.m. I'm calling this meeting to order. This is the Joint Animal Service Commission. It is September 12th, 2022. It is 5:30 p.m. This is a hybrid meeting. It's in the City of Lacey Council Chambers. So the public may also listen to the meeting by dialing toll-free at 888-788-0099. The webinar ID is 830-0344-2886. So let's go ahead and start with the roll call, and we'll go ahead and start with Peter Gabi. He's the first one on my screen.
Present.
And then Ed.
Ed Kunkel, City of Lacey.
Okay, and then can we move to the boardroom?
Jill McGugan. Sorry. Sarah Hawk.
Shannon Kelly Fong.
Perfect. Okay, so next is the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion?
Move to.
Second. I second that.
Been moved by Ed, seconded by Peter. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those against? Okay, motion passes. Next is the approval of the consent agenda, and it's the August 1st, 2022 meetings, and the approval of the August 2022 shelter statistics. Is there a motion on that?
I move for us to
Okay,
take a
is there a
vote.
second? Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Peter, seconded by Ed. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those against? Nay? Okay, motion passes. Next is public comment. Do we have anyone via Zoom? I don't see anyone, and I don't see anyone in the boardroom, so.
And I have not received any public comment either written.
Perfect. Okay. So next we will move to item 5, discussion items. The first one is initial findings from the Capital Facilities Plan project. Sarah?
Yep. Hold on 1 second. Would you like?
Those that are on Zoom, can you guys see the presentation okay? The slide that says Lacey Capital Facilities Plan?
Yes.
Perfect.
Coming in loud and clear.
Anyway, we're good. Okay, so good evening. Thanks for having us tonight. So my name is Ryan Andrews. I am the Long Range Planning Manager with the City of Lacey. I have with me Ashley Smith. Ashley works on capital projects and is in our Public Works Department. And we're here tonight to provide you with a little bit of information on an update to our City of Lacey Capital Facilities Plan. This is an abridged version of a presentation that was given to the City Council last Thursday in preparation for a major update to our plan. And so for those of you that may not quite understand what a capital facilities plan is, it's a long-range 20-year plan that recommends investments and ways to be able to pay for them through our community. And the way, you know, with the animal shelter that JASCOM is involved is that we have a animal shelter that is within Olympia jurisdiction, but is owned and maintained by the city of Lacey. So therefore, it's a city of Lacey facility, and we are going through a process now of identifying our kind of deficiencies when it comes to building both space and condition and ways to address those. So, we're looking at how do we look at our citywide operations, both here at City Hall and our operations facility that's on College Street, but also our animal shelter, and do a collaborative process that looks at a long range plan to be able to support these investments in our community. So all the facilities that we're looking at are generally kind of encompass our general administration facilities. So that's things like City Hall, our City Hall campus, Public Works, our operations headquarters, and what we call the City Yard, which is a maintenance facility we have on Martin Way. Those are also include our parks, culture, and recreation facilities that also include our senior center, the Lacey Community Center, the White House, and others. And then also animal services. So you can see there on the map, the unique thing about animal services, obviously it's a City of Lacey owned and maintained facility, but it's located in Olympia. And so you can see that kind of red dot on the left-hand side of the map there that shows the Lacey city limits. There are a number of other facilities that the city owns and maintains, things like the Lacey Library and others, but they're really not within the scope of this project. So our focus really is on City Hall, our public works operations, some parks facilities, and animal services. And I'll touch on the animal services facilities here in a little bit on what that entails. So why invest in our city facilities? Well, we are, Lacey is well into our transition of growing from basically a small town to a mid-sized city. So our population today is in the neighborhood of about 57,000 people, but is projected to be 90,000 people by, I believe that's 2045. Yeah. So, we're going to have a lot of growth within our community, and that would ring true for the other jurisdictions that also are represented. So unincorporated Thurston County, the cities of Olympia and Tumwater are also slated to grow, maybe not quite as aggressively, but are definitely growing and will grow by 2045. And it's been over a decade since Lacey has made significant investments in our civic facilities. The last one was an expansion here at Lacey City Hall. But it's important that we plan early for these improvements to meet the community's future needs. So as we grow, we want to make sure our facilities grow with them. And, as you're well aware, there are some severe deficiencies at the animal shelter in particular that need to be addressed to meet the needs of a growing community. So with each alternative, we are looking at different investment levels and approaches. So that could include some minimal approaches to looking at how do we maintain and modify some minor adjustments to our existing facilities, to some mid-range options, which kind of lead us towards some reshuffling of spaces and minor remodelings, all the way to kind of an all-in scenario, which would be an extensive remodel and or new construction. And you'll see here in a little bit, the primary recommendation at this point coming out of the capital facilities plan would be a new shelter. There's not a lot of things that we can do in the short term to be able to have an effective facility, and really, we're needing to build that facility long term. And as well, as I'll show here, it's the best use of taxpayer funds. The most efficient way to do that is, rather than spend a bunch of money on a facility that is kind of in a dilapidated state, the best way to be able to do that would be to construct a modern state-of-the-art facility. So all of the guiding principles that kind of oversee the development of this plan and all of our spaces kind of encompass these four different principles. First of all, that our facilities in the city of Lacey are safe and healthy, so that they're safe and secure, that they promote employee. And I would imagine that this, for talking about the animal shelter, is animal physical and mental well-being as well. That we're supporting recruitment and retention of employees as a place that people want to come to work. sustainable and resilient. So, that means more and better emergency response, that we are utilizing green development techniques, reducing our carbon footprint when appropriate, and that we also protect the investments in the facilities so that they last a long time. The facilities are future ready, that they allow for growth and change over time, and that they're community focused, that they create convenient, accessible, welcoming public spaces and support the goals of our community from an economic and community development standpoint. So I'm going to go into some cost estimates on what it would take to create a new animal shelter. Well, one thing that I did want to caveat with is that we are seeing some cost estimates right now that are rather atypical. When you look at our historical average for building construction projects, we average about a 3.5% increase year over year for cost increases. Coming up into COVID, so about 2019, that number was approaching about 5% per year. So costs were starting to escalate in 2019. Since 2020, we've averaged about a 14% year over year building cost escalations, and that is in 2021. And it looks like the future projections in 2022 will be consistent with that 14% number. So all that to say is that the longer we wait to do things, the more expensive a project will be. And you'll see a graph on your screen there that shows basically if you had a $10 million project, that the cost of that project in 20 years will double. So that it will be a $20 million project based on our kind of inflationary scenario that we're in right now, and that number will triple in 30 years. So the longer that we wait, the longer that, or the higher the costs associated with these projects. And when I give you these numbers, they will be based on 2022 numbers. So they're not going to be based on, what it would cost to build a facility in another 5 to 10 years. They're going to be really just focused on what it would cost today. So leading into some of the analysis that was done for the animal services facility, obviously you're well aware that it's an aging facility. It's not purpose built, that basically all the systems have been retrofitted over an older building that was not built to handle an animal shelter. They're expensive to maintain and operate, and they don't work well in a lot of instances. The spaces are undersized and inadequate for the operations and then the standards of care that are standard across the industry. And the latest kind of, part of this is that there's potential veterinary space that will be utilized in a lease trailer in the back because space is at a premium, and the spaces that are there aren't easily able to be used for animal care. So I wanted to also show you on the lower left-hand corner of the screen there too. You can see the existing facility is about a little less than 15,000 square feet. Based on our current need today, we are in need of a facility that's in the neighborhood of about 22,000 square feet. So, we're looking at about 8,000 square feet more space that's needed today, not to mention what we will need in 2045, which is approaching about 30,000 square feet for a facility to handle the demand that will be needed because our community will grow by 2045. I also wanted to show you that we did a very high level condition and function analysis, and these numbers are out of 5. So as you can see here, the condition of the facility is a 1 out of 5. Essentially, it's the lowest out of all of our city buildings, and the function is a 2 out of 5. So rather low on the function scale as well. So if you were to prioritize, which we haven't done yet, the improvements, it would rank really high on the future improvements that are needed. It's probably this or our police station. It would be a contest over which would be the most deficient in terms of condition and function. So that leads us to kind of what do we do about it? Well, as I mentioned, we've got kind of two different scenarios. We've done an all-in scenario, which is constructing a new shelter on the current site, which would be a purpose-built structure that would handle the demands of a growing community with administration and kennels, veterinary treatment, shop with laundry and grooming, outdoor exercise space, et cetera. So what we would be looking at for a facility in that range is about $18 to $23 million. Obviously, it's not feasible to be able to construct that within a quick time frame. So there are some interim solutions that are being explored at this point that would get the building would address some of the concerns with the current building that would allow us to utilize that building for a little bit longer. All that to say, I think right now this is a very high level project with some high level recommendations. Obviously, the one that it makes the most sense long term is for a new facility. What we are doing right now is we're going back to our consultant team and asking them about what some of those interim solutions could be, so that you would be able to have the building habitable for another, I don't know, 5, maybe 10 years while you were developing a funding strategy and hiring an architect and doing all the work that would be associated with the new facility. So this is a real high level estimate, what it would cost and what it would take to do that. This project though will not, for example, we will not be hiring an architect to do this work, nor, we want to really kind of program this into our future city budgets. We understand that there are other budget processes that are underway right now with other jurisdictions that would also have to be very much involved and at the table with all this. And so we thought that the timing was really right at this point, even though we haven't really solidified some of these recommendations, especially the interim solutions. We want to make sure that people were aware that some of these numbers were coming down the pike and that there was some, that this wasn't a surprise if and when, we released our final capital facilities plan and it had an $18 to $23 million project, not to mention the interim solutions to be able to get there in the future. And given that there are so many different jurisdictions at play, we wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that before we got too far down the road. So we are moving forward with our capital facilities plan. It likely will take us into early spring when we will have more information to provide as far as the more detailed recommendations, and specifically the detailed recommendations about some of the interim solutions. That work will be underway here in the next couple of months, and we're happy to come back to JASCOM when we have some more information as well. And I know Ashley's here, that our Public Works Department has done some recent work on looking at building condition, and there may be some things that we'll be doing in the interim in the very short term while we're working on some of the longer term recommendations, but wanted to make sure that you were aware that this would be coming your way. And I think that's all I had at this point. Ashley, did you want to provide any more information on specifics on that?
Sure. So I will share that the Public Works Department did a preliminary condition assessment of the facility. High level overview again, but looking at the main system components, plumbing, HVAC, electrical, the roof, and in all areas, the systems were essentially failing. So, even in the interim, to look at the ability to keep this facility functioning and keep business operating, we're going to need to put in major investments in this existing facility to kind of limp it along, where obviously the long term, the goal is a new state-of-the-art facility. So it's really important to have these conversations now. It takes a long time to get a project of this scale to completion. So the earlier the better that we can start those initial steps of moving it forward. We'll be here to support.
So that's what we had for you tonight. I'd be happy to answer any questions or get any feedback that you might have here tonight.
Thank you. Any questions?
Yes, I have a question. Actually, I have a couple of questions. So if you, so current use, if you were to start construction today, assuming that's what you want to do now, that means that that current building will be demolished, right? Is that correct? Is that assumption correct?
Asking if we built a new building, would we demolish the old one?
Correct. So that $18 to $23 million cost estimate is to build a new purpose-built structure essentially behind the existing facility.
Oh,
So that the
behind.
existing facility could operate in the interim until the new shelter was constructed. You'd move out of the old and into the new and then demolish the old facility.
Gotcha. So if you were doing that right, I don't know if you want to invest too much effort and money into showing up the whole building where you know that eventually it's going to have to go away. So if you're doing our HVAC stuff, that costs a bunch of money. So I don't know about doing those right now.
Right. Honestly, you're going to spend the amount of money, less than the amount of money that it would cost just to keep this building limping along than you would taking the first steps to designing a new facility. And so if that's the ultimate goal, that would be our recommendation, is to move towards that new project and to figure out how we can continue operations in the interim. You know, one potential that the school district does, for example, that we could look into is the modular building setup, where you would, you know, temporarily move operations out of the old facility while it's demolished and then reconstruction begins.
Okay.
So those are some
All right.
options that as mentioned, Ryan mentioned, that we're exploring with the consultant right now.
Okay, thank you. And my final question is, the cost as at today is between 18 and 23 million. So if you start in 5 years, we will assume that would be close to $35 million or thereabout. So your placeholder cost essentially is not necessarily what it would be. It would be, I think it would be more. I mean, I don't.
That's correct. The cost
assume.
estimates that we would use would be through midpoint of construction, which if that was 5 years from today, would obviously be escalated 5 years from the dollars that were shown there.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
I think the good news is the amount of property that we have to be able to do this shuffle. So, you know, consider that a perk. You know, at least we have a place to put it and a place to have temporary shelter in the interim. So those are all good things.
As an old public works director, I think you did a great job on the capital facilities plan piece. So well done.
Yes, I agree. And I don't have any questions. So any further questions? With that, thank you very much, Ryan.
Thank you.
Well,
Yeah. I'll put that back to you.
let me scroll up to the next is the next steps for JASCOM veterinary appointed position.
I'm sorry, my little.
So next steps, I did meet with Dr. Victoria Smith earlier this month and gave her a tour of the facility. I am recommending that we move her towards the next step of the appointment process, which would be to invite her for an interview and to interview the candidate. There are two ways that we can do this. We can invite Dr. Smith to the next JASCOM meeting and do a formal interview during our meeting time, or JASCOM can choose to select an interview panel. I am suggesting that it consists of our chair, Lisa Parsley, additional JASCOM member, and the director. The panel would then interview our candidate and make a recommendation to JASCOM following the interview. My question for JASCOM would be, what would be your preference for the interview?
Comments, questions?
That seems reasonable to me, Sarah. I think, yeah, I not to conflate anything or cause confusion, but I think we got the right handle on it.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea too. I don't think we all need to be involved in the interview. So that a panel like you suggested to me is the appropriate solution.
I agree.
Fantastic. Then I will reach out for my voluntary third interview panel. Or if somebody is interested on being on the panel with me and Chair Parsley, please feel free to reach out and let me know. And I will get that scheduled with Dr. Smith. And we will have our recommendation for the following October meeting.
Super.
Okay. So if anyone wants to volunteer for that, and then there's the letter of recommending the next steps and the letter of interest and resume. She seems very highly qualified. So there's no action items. And so we will be moving to director's report.
Yes. Pardon me. So we briefly talked about how there is some significant deterioration to the building, which is why we are looking at a new building. But one of the things that we would like JASCOM to be thinking about is there are some things that we do need to do in the interim to stay in this building. Currently, the kenneling system that we have for our dogs in the shelter is the original kennel system from when the building was retrofitted 36 years ago. These kennels are only made to last 10 to 15 years. We have done a lot of repair and stopgaps on these over the past 36 years, but what we are finding is we are at a point that they are not repairable anymore. And so part of the findings from our public works supervisor was that at this point, the kennels are completely rusted out from underneath. The stainless steel drain lines are not supported in areas due to degraded drain gutters. Most of the caulking at the seams and drain liner laps have failed, and it's allowing water through, which is most evident at drain terminations. This means that animal waste contaminated water is leaking out onto the floor, creating a slip hazard and direct contact with waste for staff and patrons. The slow leak at the drain termination allows water to drip onto the floor for hours after the rinsing is complete. As seen in the photos from the director's report and on your slides, there's no material underneath in some of these areas for new caulking to adhere to, making repairs to the drain system as it is installed not possible. So the estimated cost currently to replace the entire kenneling system for the dogs specifically would be, we are looking at $500,000 to $600,000, including labor. And that is a significant investment. We can look at even portioning it out with some of the worst ones getting replaced first. But this is something that would have to be repaired for us to be able to stay in the building. Councilmember Kunkel?
Yeah, so regarding those kennels and the potential of replacing with new, is it possible for us to do the replacement with the intention of repurposing the new kennels into the new facility? Is that something we can think long term about?
We could think long-term about that. That's a great question. I think it would really depend how long our intention was before we started the build. Seeing as how these kennels only last roughly 10 to 15 years, if it's 5 years before the new building is even started, we're already halfway through that kind of that shelf life and guarantee of those kennels. So yeah, it is one of those, we can look at it. There's certain ones that we can bring over. For example, a lot of our stainless steel cat kennels that we have last much longer than these. We can look at also different types of kenneling if there's some that last longer than others. And we can also talk with the different kennel companies to see if we buy ones configured for this space, would they be able to break apart and then be configured in the next space? So
that seems like it'd be a wise investment if we do. I mean, even if it costs a little bit more in the long run, it seems like we would get more use of that.
we can start looking at, this estimate was already built from a couple of the kennel companies, so we can start digging deeper of kind of how some of these work, if they can be taken apart and reconfigured differently, and what some of our options are. But I wanted to make JASCOM kind of aware of some of the conditions that both the animals and the staff are currently working and living in. Shannon.
And Councilmember Kunkel, just to build off of that a little bit, I mean, holistically, replacing all of the kennels are quoted or estimated for this amount. And as Sarah mentioned, we might be able to focus strategically on certain areas as we kind of are in this interim state before we, kind of move forward with a larger scale project. So we might be able to find out, what strategically makes sense to replace now and what we might be able to hold off until a little bit later, if we can hold off until a little bit later.
Commissioner.
I think it's pretty unusual when you're talking about working on drains to move a drain from one application to another, one building to another would be very, very difficult. Sarah, the question I have is, do we have the resources?
We do have the resources in reserves. This would significantly deplete those. We're at about 1.2 million in reserves. Not all of those are specifically for capital expenditures. So we would also have to reallocate some of the funding that was allocated per JASCOM, but we cannot touch any of the restricted funding.
Yeah, I suspect that it's going to be at least 2 or 3 years before we come up with whether or not we're going to build a new building or how we're going to approach this. Another year for financing, and then you've got these things working for maybe 10 years. So if there's a way that you can reduce the number of redos that you have to do, that would be interesting. But I think we're looking at drains, which means pretty much stuck where you're going to be with those, and then for a new building, a completely different application.
Thanks. Sarah, my question was going to be in regards to, for me, I see it as kind of a risk, especially with employees going through that area and creating that possible structure for a claim. So is this something that maybe we can, get from insurance to help out a little bit? Is it a possibility?
But I mean, that's a good thought. It is from a risk standpoint. There, like Ashley was saying, there are significant repairs to this building if we're going to stay. And a lot of them have to do with safety, risk, and the health and well-being of the animals and the staff, as well as the community that's in our building. And this would be one of those that we have to make sure, replacing the kennels and being able to then reseal some of the plumbing underneath. We're not talking about digging down in these areas, This is specifically the kennels that have rusted and eroded away so much from 36 years of cleaning that we can no longer fix what's leaking out of them. And even to try to take them apart would not work at this point either, because we would never be able to get them back together again. And so the leaking that's being caused does become a safety risk for everybody that's in that building.
Okay. So with this, do you need a decision from us? What's the next steps for this, Sarah?
Next steps would be for us to research more, find a little bit more funding. I am going to recommend that we look at the very least replacing the kennels in adoption, since that is where public activity is the most. And this is, both of these photos are from the adoption floor. That we are estimating at closer to $150,000 for replacing. And so that would be my recommendation, but I will bring, once we get closer and have done our research, I will bring forward some different options for us to look at.
Okay.
Bring Kitty on in here.
Some other updates. We met with the Thurston County Sheriff's Office, and we now have an established quarterly meeting so that we can open up lines of communication and just discuss any issues when they occur. And it was a really good meeting, lots of discussion, and hopefully this will make sure that there isn't any miscommunications in the moving forward, because they have all of our contact information. They know who to reach out to, they know our operating hours, and they know the process that we're going through to hire our other field members. Staffing, we have made 2 contingent offers for animal services field officers, and expect them to complete the hiring process hopefully by mid-October. We did have one internal candidate, Caitlin Northrup, who has finished her hiring process, and she has officially become a field officer. We also received our first aid certification. The entire staff went through their first aid and CPR training. And this is just one more step as we are considered a first responder during natural disasters. And I'm finishing my director's report with a happy tale. This is Waffles. Waffles was with us for almost a year. He would be what we would call a behavior dog. Not only did he have lots of energy, lots of what people would consider undesirable behaviors. He unfortunately, he did not like other animals, so he could not go home with other animals. And he had a bite history because before he came in, somebody broke up a dog fight and he turned around and bit him. So, you know, people would see that he couldn't go home with animals, that he had a bite history. They see this very, very large pointer mix with all this energy bouncing around. And so he was with us for quite a while. And then one day we had a couple come in asking to see the dog that has been at the shelter the longest. They have 2 acres. And their entire property is fenced. And so this was the recent update we got from Waffles. You guys can see him lounging on the deck right here, happy as a little clam. And so what's really great about the update that they gave us is all the things that we saw at the shelter. So his aggressiveness towards other animals, his like high activity level, all of these things that we're just seeing in this moment of time, because that's all we're seeing them in this stressful environment. Completely different dog when he got home. So he runs his property. He shows no signs of aggression towards his neighbor dogs. He will hunt the occasional rabbit and squirrel and hangs out all day patrolling his little area, says hello to the neighbors as they come by. And then every night he comes in and goes to sleep in his bed and won't move until they wake up in the morning when he goes charging back outside to patrol his new home. So Waffles is very, very happy, and we're very, very happy for him.
Great story.
He was a sweet dog, but people would see him. He looks cute and small. That was the one where you see the full view of him. That was his profile pic. And so everybody thought he was much smaller. And they get him, and then the kennels are elevated. And so you'd have this big dog like right in their face, like barking and jumping at you. And everybody was just instantly like, nope, never mind. Can we see somebody else? And so it was really great when they came in and just, took him for what he was, and he's perfectly happy where he is. So we were so happy with that one. Great adoption.
That is a great adoption. Thank you so much for that, Happy Tales. Okay, so we've reached the end of our agenda. Is there anything else we need to discuss before we jump off? Okay, this meeting is adjourned.